This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Palawa people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
Getting that feedback and seeing the enjoyment that people get from the wine is really important to me, because at the end of the day, people get quite deep and philosophical about wine, but really I'm just making wines for people to enjoy.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Holm Oak is a labour of love for the Duffys. Winemaker Bec Duffy and viticulturist Tim Duffy are living their dream crafting cool climate wines in the Tamar Valley of Tasmania. Hi Bec, thanks for joining me.
Thanks Shanteh, nice to be with you.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you on the podcast. At the age of 14, you decided you wanted to be a winemaker, is that right?
Yeah, that is right. It was a bit of an unusual decision for a 14-year-old whose parents don't drink wine and I grew up on a little island where there is no wine industry.
That is bizarre. I think my greatest dream at that age was to go to a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert or something like that. I mean, I can't even imagine thinking about my future. So what a unique individual you are. Tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up on King Island.
So it was lots of fun, but it was quite isolated. There was a population of about 2,000 people there. So as you can imagine, everybody knows everybody and everybody knows what everybody else is doing as well. I grew up on a farm though, so it was really great to sort of have that agricultural background. As a kid, we went fishing a lot. We went to the beach. We played golf as well. My parents were really into golf. So, it was a really nice way to grow up. But then at the age of about 13, when I was in grade 8, I went to boarding school in Launceston, which I also really enjoyed. It was nice to be able to get off the island. And as now a parent of a 12 and a 13-year-old, I'm very grateful for my parents for doing that, because I can't imagine actually sending my kids off to boarding school.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but you grew up on a small island, then you graduated and decided to go up to a slightly bigger island. What do you like in big cities? Do you enjoy them, or do you just feel a bit suffocated and stifled?
I like going for short periods of time. I certainly don't enjoy the traffic, as I'm sure most people don't, but certainly much prefer to live in open spaces and where I can't see the neighbours. But yeah, definitely I enjoy the country lifestyle more than the city, but it's always nice to go to the city, go to some great restaurants and, do some shopping as well.
I tend to agree with you on that. It's nice to be in the hustle and bustle and all the wonderful restaurants and everything, but then to kind of escape and be able to breathe again. So you said you're going to be a winemaker. How did you come to that decision, and then how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so when I was in grade 10, we sort of you get the book of all the different occupations that you can do, because you've got to go off and do work experience somewhere. And it was always in my mind that I might sort of wanted to do something in agriculture, and I enjoyed chemistry and biology and sciences. So I thought I would have a look through the book, and the last one in the book was winemaking, and I thought that might be a good profession for me. I also, at the same time, when I did my work experience, the other occupation I thought I might like is to be a chiropractor. Which is something very different, obviously. So for work experience in grade 10, I did 2 days at Piper's Brook. This was back in the early 90s. And I did 2 days at a chiropractor as well. And when I was at the chiropractor, I almost fainted from all of the cracking and the manipulation that they were doing. So sort of the medical profession definitely wasn't for me, so winemaking it was.
So a hard pass on that.
So from there, I just decided that I was going to be a winemaker, and so in grade 11 and 12, I chose subjects that were geared towards that, and then when I finished grade 12, I went straight to university and studied winemaking in Adelaide.
Amazing. What a visionary. That's so awesome. And you did some work experience around the world. What was the kind of most influential experience that you had in terms of, cementing what you wanted to do?
That's sort of an interesting question, because I worked in the Napa Valley for a vintage, which was a lot of fun, but obviously much more Cabernet focused over there. And then I think probably I came back and worked at Wynns for a vintage, which I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed that sort of heritage and such a great brand to work with. Unfortunately, not one of the greatest vintages that they'd had there, but I enjoyed that. But I ended up at Capel Vale in Western Australia after a stint on King Island doing cheesemaking. I thought I might want to be a cheesemaker and take a bit of a career change, but that's probably actually what cemented me into winemaking, because I decided that I didn't like cheesemaking. It was kind of quite repetitive and the same thing every day. Very early starts all year as well. And so I thought that's when I then got the job at Capel Vale, and that really sort of cemented for me what I wanted to do. It was a great experience there, and I got to make wine from a lot of different regions in Western Australia, which was really enjoyable for me. And I guess that's where I really decided that, this is definitely what I want to do. So I was over there for 5 years.
Oh, you chose some amazing spots and all really different. I mean, that Napa's like mammoth, isn't it? And then, to be over in WA with, and like you said, in Coonawarra as well, all really iconic kind of wonderful winemaking regions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a great time at Tatachilla in McLaren Vale when it was there as well. So that was a really fun vintage.
Oh, so much great experience. You decided to come back though, and how did you decide in the Tamar Valley and up in the north?
So this was, I guess it was kind of fortuitous. It was the property came up for sale because the previous owners were getting divorced, and my parents' accountants was also the accountants of this other couple. And my mum and dad had helped out my sister and her husband in their business. He's a crayfisherman, and so they thought that they needed to even up the ledger a little bit. And so they asked me whether I would like to move back to Tasmania and have my own sort of vineyard and winery. And being very naive, I said yes. This was in 2004. The previous owner was going to lease it back for a couple of years, so I still had a little bit more time to sort of learn my craft a little bit more, I suppose, and get prepared. But so I moved back to Tasmania in 2006. So that's how it all came about. It wasn't something that I was, I guess, thinking of. It was just an opportunistic thing, which worked out in the end, thankfully.
And Holm Oak, the vineyards have been planted there for quite some time. So it really is a bit of an institution, and you've got some really gorgeous old vines.
Yeah, so the vineyard was planted originally in 1983. There was actually a lot of Cabernet planted on the vineyard in the early days. Cabernet was something that people were drinking at the time. Back in the early 80s, people were drinking, Cabernet from the Coonawarra. Pinot probably wasn't something that was heard of so much in Australia back then. And so I have a fair bit of old Cabernet vines. And fortunately, our location right on the river means we're a slightly warmer site, so we still have Cabernet planted, and then there was a small planting of Pinot as part of the original planting as well. So when we took over the vineyard, there was 6 hectares of vines, mostly Pinot Noir and Cabernet, and a little bit of Riesling. So yeah, some really lovely old vines there to work with, which was nice, and also to build on. We've sort of planted a fair bit more since then.
I'm glad that you've kept some of those great old Cabernet vines. And yes, I know that, cooler climate varieties have really kind of flourished down in Tassie, and you guys are known for your exceptional Pinot Noir, and I'm a big fan of your Riesling as well. And I know you have Arnaise planted down there too. But it's great to see that you've kept some of that history as well. And the Tamar's a very special place where you are able to do quite a few different varieties. Just for the listeners, can you tell me a little bit about what makes kind of Tamar Valley special?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as the name suggests, we are in a valley. I guess it's an estuary-based valley. So, while it's called a river, the Tamar River is quite big. It is tidal, and it has quite a strong influence on the different locations in the valley. It's quite interesting because it's not a wide, flat expanse. There's lots of sort of hills and peninsulas that stick out into the river like we do. And then you've got obviously the sides of the valley where it's slightly cooler. So a really big influence from the river. During the ripening season, we get a lot of fog coming down the river as well, which creates quite a humid environment, which is great for aromatic development, also great for botrytis. So disease pressure can be relatively high where we are. But just a really diverse and beautiful valley where you can grow lots of different varieties, as you said, because it's just slightly warmer depending on where you are in the valley. As I said, we stick out on a bit of a peninsula right in the valley floor, so slightly warmer where we are, where you go, 10 minutes up the road and you're up the side of the valley a little bit more and it's slightly cooler and different soils. So great diversity, and even across our own site, really different wines from block to block on our own sort of site as well.
Yeah, and mostly it's kind of the orientation's north to south. Is that right?
Yeah. So all of our vines are planted. The rows are north facing. So that means you get the really lovely morning sun on the eastern side of the vines, which helps with that ripening, and also just drying out the vines in the morning if you've had those foggy mornings, and then you get that really lovely sunlight into the vines.
Well, I think Tassie wine's never been at a better place than it is right now, and a lot of the conversations in restaurants tend to be kind of looking stylistically at the different regions and kind of the expressions that you get. So Pinot Noir is something that kind of comes up quite a bit, and I think you're well versed in Pinot Noir and all your different clones that you have. How would you describe Pinot Noir and its kind of flavour profile and style as opposed to other regions in Tasmania?
So I guess Pinot Noir, it's such a interesting and tricky variety that it's so many different iterations of what you can do with it depending on how it's grown, even from, like I said, from our north-facing river block to our flatter sort of winery block. You get really big differences in the texture and the structure and the aromatics of the wine. So with Pinot and our winery block, which is flatter, it's definitely lighter, more sort of strawberry fruit characters, beautiful and aromatic, but doesn't have the same level of tannin structure to our slightly warmer block, which is down on a north-facing slope on the river, which you tend to get more density and spice and tannin structure. So that's just a really small example of vines that are maybe 100 metres apart on how different they can be. So to then sort of, I guess, expand that beyond our own vineyard, the possibilities are endless for the different styles that you want to make. And that's what's really fun. And particularly for Tim and I, he being a viticulturist and me being a winemaker, we get that really sort of close relationship. And with Pinot, it's really important to get it right in the vineyard and in the winery. Some varieties, it's very much like a winemaker's wine, which is sort of more in the Chardonnay realm, and some are very much the viticulturalist wine, which is more like Riesling. You need to get that perfect in the vineyard. But with Pinot, it's very much that working together, which makes the different styles and working out what you want to make. You really need that close relationship as a viticulturalist and a winemaker to be able to pull that off, I think.
Well, now that you bring that up, I was going to ask you, working with your husband, do you tend to keep, your jobs quite separate? Or like you said, at some points you do need to, but other times you really need to work together. Is that right?
Yeah, we do keep them fairly separate. I guess they're very different. People kind of think that, if you've got a vineyard, then you sort of do everything, but growing grapes is very different to making wine. So his passion and speciality is in growing the grapes, where I much prefer to be in the winery making the wines. But they're definitely at vintage time is probably when we work most closely together and have the most arguments. It's definitely, and then we'll be looking at the wines as we go through the whole year, watching the wines mature and work out what worked in particular a particular block and what might not have done. And I guess we've been there for about 17 years now, which is quite a long time, but really we've only had 17 goes at making those wines, and some even less because we've obviously been planting new blocks. So you only get sort of one shot at it each year to try something different. So it definitely is, making small incremental changes over time, but it does take a long time for that to come to fruition, I guess. So yeah, it's definitely something that we work on together, but it's nice not to see each other all of the time.
Yes, sometimes you do need to kind of divide and conquer and go to your separate ways.
At the end of the day, he gets the final say in the vineyard and I get the final say in the winery.
Perfect. Clear-cut definition. I love that.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, Bec, you seem like a little bit of an ideas person. Tell me a little bit about your sensory garden.
Yeah, so I do come up with lots of ideas, and some come to fruition and some don't, but I'm pretty happy that I got this sensory garden off the ground. A long time ago, I was reading about a place in the States, which is a winery called Kendall Jackson, and they have a sensory garden where the garden is planted to represent different grape varieties. And I thought that was a really interesting and fun way to demonstrate the different aromas and textures and flavours that you get in wine using plants. And because Tim really likes to grow things and I like to make things, we thought that it might be fun to do that out at Holm Oak. We're also looking for something to attract people to our cellar door that wasn't, the usual thing like a restaurant or something like that, because we really didn't want to go down that path. So we decided to start planting our sensory garden, which was probably about 8 years ago now. So it's taken a long time for all the plants to be established. But now we have a garden where each part of the garden represents a different grape variety. So, for example, in the Pinot Noir garden, we have strawberries and cherries and blueberries. We've got a Sauvignon Blanc garden, even though we don't make Sauvignon Blanc anymore, but it's got passion fruit and asparagus and gooseberries. The Chardonnay garden has a lot of stone fruit trees. So just a really nice way to be able to talk people through the different aroma compounds and how they develop in wine and why they're similar to what you find in plants. And then it's been really great to actually run the tours this year, now that the garden's reaching sort of a mature stage where we can take people around and, eat a nectarine and smell the Chardonnay and get to understand the different aromas and textures in wine as well. So we have a little texture garden where you can feel the different plants that represent the different textures that you have on the palate. So it's been really fun, actually. I really like it.
Oh, it sounds, to me, that just makes so much sense. And to me, it just sounds like a wonderland. It's, I think, one of the most brilliant parts of being involved in wine is just how descriptive and how alluring wine can be. But it is hard sometimes for people when they're getting started to kind of look into a glass and see all those things. But you have to start somewhere. And I think that putting, those senses in front of people and asking them to kind of be curious about the world they live in and pick up and smell and taste things is the best way to do it. So I just think it sounds like a delight. And I think, if anyone's down that way, that is something that they just have to do.
Yeah, it's really fun. And even like just eating an apple and getting that malic acid character, which is the same sort of acidity that you find in Riesling and, well, it's in all wine, but, particularly prominent in Riesling. And then they go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then how you can convert that, that malic acid, which is quite hard, into lactic acid. That's like, the acid that you get in milk, which is much softer. It just all sort of starts to come together for people when you can actually demonstrate it with something that they understand a little bit more.
Yeah. And it's all about, I suppose, having the right people to facilitate that experience too, isn't it? Because it's about somebody that can communicate to lots of different people. So who manages that part of it for you?
So I do the tastings. So I make myself available for those, which is fun. I have my cellar door manager sort of does the actual tour of the garden, and then you can go and collect all the bits and pieces that we need to make the tasting lots of fun. So we sort of split it between the two of us, and it's been really great. The people who have been coming on our tours, some are more knowledgeable than others, and it's really just great to be able to give people a little bit more of an insight into the complexities involved in wine, but without being, too bamboozling, I suppose, because there is a lot of chemistry and stuff involved, which even, I struggle to understand at times.
Good gracious. So not only are you make a good amount of wine with lots of different varieties, you're also doing these sensory garden classes as well, which just blows my mind. I mean, for a lot of people coming to a cellar door, even just seeing the winemaker is a total thrill, let alone if they're pouring the wine for you and chatting and doing something like that. I have no idea how you find the time, but I think that that's pretty amazing. And yeah, even more of a reason to get down there and do that. You have a busy home. I believe you've got some gorgeous children, you've got a couple of family dogs, and you have 3 pigs as well?
We do have 3 pigs. We have Pinot, Pinot Junior and Mayonnaise.
Who called a pig mayonnaise? Who came up with that?
My eldest son, Max, he always wanted a pug and wanted to call it mayonnaise, but I told him he couldn't have a pug because they have a few issues. And so we got he decided he would call his pig mayonnaise. I don't know where it came from.
I think it's very cute. The first pig that you got, which his name is, what did you say, Manager Pinot de Pig, you thought he was a miniature, is that right?
Yeah, so he was advertised in the paper, like the local paper, the Examiner, as a miniature pig. And so we thought this would be fun to have a pig. My husband actually had a pet pig when he was young called Jackson. And so Tim's like, we need a pig. And I'm like, no, we don't need a pig. This was like back in, 2008. It was a long time ago. We've had Pinot longer than we've had kids. And anyway, so it's advertised in the paper. So we went out to Deloraine. We took the little cat box out with us to put him in. And he was quite small, obviously, as a piglet. But then, yeah, he did grow into quite a sizable pig. He used to just roam around the vineyard, and he and our chocolate lab, Bella, would go on adventures around the Tamar Valley and create all sorts of havoc. So now he just has they have their own sort of yard. But, yeah, in the early days, he used to just roam free. But sometimes would dig up the neighbour's lawn, which wasn't ideal.
I can't imagine just as he's growing, just thinking, oh my God, this is not a miniature. I've heard that story before, not about you guys, but about other people. But I mean, I think maybe people don't want to know, but pigs have really incredible little characters. My first job, like yours, was doing work experience. Mine was at a zoo, and I had to clean a lot of the pens. And I used to love the pig pen because they were such funny characters. They all had distinct personalities, and they all did the funniest little things. And I loved being in there with them.
Yeah, they are very funny. Even yesterday, we have an overload of zucchini, so I was throwing them zucchinis, but Mayonnaise always runs and grabs his food and then takes it somewhere else because otherwise Pinot might steal it from him. So, yeah, they definitely do have their own personalities, and they're quite intelligent. We did teach Pinot to sit. He's a bit old now to sit, but yeah, using our chocolate lab, she would sit and then Pinot would sit as well for food.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like a very busy household, but it also sounds like a lot of fun. Bec, what do you love most about your job? What keeps you doing it day in, day out?
I think it's just seeing people enjoy our wines, like you said about me doing the sensory garden tastings with the customers. And I think, getting that feedback and seeing the enjoyment that people get from the wine is really important to me, because at the end of the day, people get quite deep and philosophical about wine, but really I'm just making wines for people to enjoy. So that keeps me going. I just really love winemaking. It's lots of fun. There's so many different things you can do. It's something different every day. So I really enjoy that. And I actually like the challenge of running a business as well. And coming up with new ideas and being able to have our own business and make wine and sort of be, I guess, entrepreneurial in a way as well, thinking about new things that we might be able to do is lots of fun. So there's never a dull moment, that's for sure.
Oh, it sounds like it. I mean, you're very humble, but you're a highly awarded winemaker, and your wines win gold medals and, skyrocket, scores year in and year out. So whatever you're doing, you're certainly doing it right.
Thank you.
Bec, I wanted to know, if you could only drink 3 drinks for the rest of your life, what would they be and why?
Well, I was thinking, depending on how specific I need to be, I was red wine, white wine, and sparkling wine.
You know what? I'll let you get away with that because...
But then if I needed to be more specific, I'd probably go Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are definitely my favourite. My favourite varieties, both to drink and make. They're very versatile. There's lots of different styles. You know, we make 6 different wines from Pinot, so definitely one of my favourites. But I could potentially drop the sparkling wine for gin and tonic, just because it's always nice to have a gin and tonic on a nice hot day after a big day at work.
Yes, definitely. That kind of sense of refreshing. Excellent choices. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really want to get down there, and if it's possible, I'd love to have a glass of Pinot with you and Pinot the pig, if that's possible. And really, I'd love to have that experience of a sensory garden, maybe, you know, with even my husband or family or something, because I just think that sounds like so much fun to do together. And I'm really glad that you had some time for me today. I appreciate it. And I love what you do down there. And I look forward to seeing your wine soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Shanteh. I really enjoyed this chat.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.